Yeah, so I don't know if anybody caught, but happy 4th to you guys. Hope it was a good one. And I just kind of wanted to get you guys' thoughts kind of on the direction that USC football program seems to be going under Lincoln Riley. If you kind of feel like maybe that at some point there needs to be a move towards maybe a replacement. I mean, I know they've been kind of up and down lately. Recruitment's been kind of off, and I just kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on just kind of, I guess, the current outlook of the state of the program.
Okay, appreciate that. Well, let me hit that really quickly. So the outlook of the program, I think, is fine overall. I do believe the funding is there for the NIL. I do believe that USC, the administration is behind the football program like we haven't had in quite some time. I think Carol Folt on down, Jennifer Cohen, our AD, and Lincoln Riley. Those people I have no issue with. Matt had made a good point though, with as far as Jennifer Cohen's concerned. She does need to be held accountable for the situation going on with the NIL. I can't imagine that USC does just. I get it. So we're going to lose some to Ohio State. We're going to lose some to Oregon. But it just seems like we're losing all of them, Matt. It just seems like we're just getting. It's like a bloodbath, and we have kids that are interested. The coaches do their jobs, and then they gets lost. But if you're talking about, I think Lincoln Riley is a top 5 coach, and I will maintain that as well. You know, we've heard for the longest time that all he needs is a good defense, and he has that with Danton Lynn. In the offseason, USC brought in a great defensive staff. We're going to see this year, right? And we could be excited about how great it looks on paper, but we won't know until this year. And Buckeye Mike trying to erase what Lincoln Riley has done off of one bad season, because that's really all it's been. The year before, he had 11 wins. Last year was a bad year for him, a bad year for USC. But I'll tell you what, there's probably about 75 to 80 teams across the country would love to have 8 wins every year. So, I mean, yes, down by USC standards.
Oh, yeah.
I think that what you have to realize is, and I've said this many times on the show, Rome was not built in a day. And when you run a program into the ground like USC did under 6 years of Clay Helton, you're not going to get out of it in 1 year. So I think that having an amazing player like Caleb Williams was able to mask a lot of the problems and how bad the program had gone down the tubes under Helton and hanging on to Helton for so long. And obviously hanging on to Alex Grinch. He was able to kind of mitigate those issues in 1 year, but then the offensive line fell apart, the depth on the offensive line, and we saw last year. Matt, I'd like to hear your thoughts on where do you think the program is right now?
Well, you know, we talk about the state of the program. We talk about the state of the program nearly every week here because, well, we have nothing else to do until the regular season starts and until August camp starts. We're going to get some fresh, new, tasty storylines. Also, Big Ten Media Days coming up in a few weeks. So in a couple of weeks, like the off season is going to end, and we're actually going to be talking about the season itself. But while we're still in this off season mode, one can only reiterate the basic truths. One, Lincoln Riley wasted a year by bringing back Alex Grinch, and it set back the program, and he's still paying the price for that. Two, Jen Cohen inherited a situation. You know, she came aboard in August of last year. So everyone thought, oh, Jen Cohen's just going to come in with the program at high tide, and she's just going to have to do maintenance. Like I'm sure she didn't expect when she came aboard in August of 2023 that she would have to repair USC football, but she's had to because Lincoln Riley endured that miserable 5-loss season. She had to hire defensive coaches, which, by the way, she deserves credit for, you know, ponying up to make sure that Lincoln Riley got a top quality defensive staff. Like, she deserves credit for that. But Jen Cohen has definitely been caught off guard with NIL. Like, she is playing catch up. She was not ready for the enormity of the deficit that USC faces relative to, in particular, Ohio State and Oregon. And so she's playing catch up. Now, she didn't expect to be in this position because she thought, like most of us, that USC was going to win 10 or 11 games last year, wasn't going to lose ground with recruits the way it has been, like the damage of last season. We have to acknowledge the damage that last year did. But of course, like, we shouldn't give excuses to Jen Cohen. If you sign on to be the athletic director at USC, you need to be prepared. You need to be ready for what's coming around the bend. And Cohen's long-term vision has not been as clear as it should be. And so she's several steps behind. It's not entirely her fault, but with these accumulated losses, these accumulated humiliations over the summer, like, she's definitely needs to get it fixed for the next cycle. Now, folks saying that Jen Cohen should be fired, you can't fire an AD after 1 year. Way too short, right? And again, Lincoln Riley having the bad 2023 season, that more than anything Jen Cohen has done is why USC is in this position. But let's keep in mind, if you fire Jen Cohen after 1 year, are you going to get a prime candidate, a prime replacement for her? People are not going to want to take this job if you do something like that. You have to give people time and space on the job. But of course, admitting that, you also have to say, Jen Cohen, you need to be on top of situations. That is what you're paid for. You need to be seeing the big picture. You need to be seeing the moving parts on the chessboard, and she's behind the curve, and she needs to get up to speed. There's no question about that. And
quite frankly, man, I'm going to ask you this point, Blake. Do you think Jen Cohen needs to be relieved? Because I think she's done a great job here. The question mark is the NIL, but the NIL was a mess when she showed up here, and you can't just flip that around. I agree. Right. She has been here, and there needs to be improvement. And I didn't really, I'm embarrassed to say it, I wasn't really looking at the Jen Cohen aspect of it, but this falls squarely on the AD to get this, because you know damn well that the ADs and other programs have this stuff tight. So, I don't think you're calling for her job. And there's people out there, but there's USC fans everywhere always wanting people to get fired right away,
Yeah, I brought up the topic because people in the chat are saying she needs to be fired.
Right.
That's why I brought it up. And so,
you got to look at the entirety of the situation. Yes, the NIL is not where we want to be. I'm sure it's not where she wants it to be. I'm sure it's not where anywhere is where they want it to be. But she walked into this mess, and a lot of these programs that are rolling, they didn't just pop up overnight and get this going. There is a process to this. I know a lot of fans don't want to hear that. Now, she didn't have unlimited time. I'm sure it's probably number one on her list of things to sort out, because pretty soon we're getting decommitments from players. When do we start getting decommitments from coaches who, again, there was supposed to be vertical alignment here? You're going to leave Oklahoma because you weren't getting supported in Oklahoma. You come to SC and you're not getting supported here. I'm telling you guys, Jared, as much as people want to say, oh, Riley this, and Mike, you saying that when are we going to fire Riley? We're not going to. Number one, he's a great coach. He'll go to the NFL. That's where he'll go. He doesn't need to sit here in college football. He will get a pro job. So thank you, Mike. Appreciate you calling in. Thank you. We love hearing from other fan bases, especially call back again anytime. All right, Mike?
Yeah. So I know you guys were just talking about Jen Cohen and how she should take some accountability for what's been going on related to NIL. I was just wondering your thoughts and opinions of Dave Emmerich and his role and input as a general manager.
It's a great point as well. So for those of you guys that aren't familiar, Dave Emmerich came over from, I believe, Mississippi State. Was that right, Matt? He worked with Mike Leach and that whole Riley Leach connection. Came over to USC, and he's kind of been that operations guy at USC for Lincoln Riley. He has been getting a lot of heat. As a matter of fact, some of the stuff I've heard, I'm sure allowed to talk about it, but basically even going specifically to this Petty John situation, names keep popping up, and his name is one of the names that keeps popping up. Going back to a couple of weeks ago, I heard things about the athletic department. None of it's really changed. But again, Dave Emmerich's name keeps popping up. I actually don't have any information directly about his role and what he's not doing or what he is doing. But I can tell you from people that know a heck of a lot more about the program than I do keep hearing his name. Matt, how about you?
Haven't heard anything specific.
Did you want to share anything, Christian?
I'm sorry?
Like I said, I'm not repeating stuff that I've heard because I'm just hearing stuff. And I will say, I'm hearing from people that I have a lot of faith in, but I don't want to repeat stuff I don't have firsthand knowledge of. Is there anything you wanted to share?
No, I've been kind of hearing some rumbling too, so I just kind of wanted to see if there was anything out there that you guys are open to sharing. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I do have one more question if you're done covering that though.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've heard rumors of also, you might want to check in tomorrow, Gabe over at Trojan Blade. I think he's doing a video that may have him more information that you might want to hear. If you're not familiar with the channel, make sure you check him out. The link to his channel is in the description of this video. So what was your other point you wanted to make?
Thank you. My next point, I was just wondering, how much do you think the defensive coaches, like the ones that they just hired, how they're likely wanting coordinator or head coaching jobs, how much do you think that's affecting like recruits' decisions to commit?
That's a great point, and that might be some negative recruiting being used against them. But I mean, they just got here, so you got to figure they're going to be here for a couple of years. I don't think we're seeing anybody on the staff's going to be gone in 1 year. I mean, who knows? USC wins the national.
Okay.
USC wins the national championship. The line is just destroying people, and then Danton Lynn has a 2008-esque season where they're giving up less than 10 points a game and holding teams at 80 yards rushing. Yeah, then maybe we might lose him to the NFL or to another job. But I'm going to guess in year 1 year, I think that these guys will be around for a couple of years. And here's another thing: you really can't. These kids that do decide to go to a school based on a coach, and you go to your position coach, right? That's the guy who's with you the most. But I mean, these coaches leave too, and it's the same thing at an Ohio State or at an Oregon or an Alabama or a Georgia. There are circumstances where it's going to happen. I do agree with you though. I mean, Matt Entz, for instance, an example. This is a man who's pretty much on record saying that he is here to get some experience at the D1. That's right, not D1, the FBS level. Because that's what he was hearing when he was looking for FBS jobs, that he didn't have that FBS experience. I get that point. Whereas at other schools, you have guys that, for instance, Brian Hartline, who's at a position for a long time. I get what you mean, the longevity of it, and whereas these guys seem they might be transient. That's a very valid point. I don't know how much that goes into individual choices, but that's a very solid observation.
Yeah, I actually agree a little bit with Matt. There's a lot of problems with the program, and I think it really does go back to Riley. He should have never brought Grinch over in the first place. He had a proven track record that wasn't real good, and I think that affected recruiting and keeping players on both sides of the ball, not just the defense, but the offense as well. The other thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and I'm a lifelong Trojan fan. I've been going there since Charles White, and those guys were over there playing. Marcus Allen,
Anthony Munoz
was a quarterback. So,
Buddy, yeah, those guys
what's
were
that?
Anthony Munoz, Brad Buddy. That was an amazing team there. Absolutely. Don't forget.
So I've been a lifelong Trojan fan, but what's really got me we're hearing rumblings from different channels about broken promises to the players, and there's a big problem with the NIL. But it seems like SC's had problems, to be quite frank, ever since they let go of Coach O. And that ever since then, we've had nothing but trouble over there. Now, I understand it's a different era, but Riley bringing Grinch over, it's affected things years to come. And with that kind of coaching contract he got, it doesn't make sense why you would bring that in. The school's already trying to rebuild, and that started us off with damage right from the gate.
You bring up Coach O, who a lot of people forget. I mean, everyone knows he was here for Pete Carroll years and those massive recruiting. Really got the recruiting rolling with Sean Cody when he wasn't even on staff yet. He was a holdover from the Hackett coaching staff. Stole Sean Cody from Notre Dame. And then we all know what the recruiting was like during the Pete Carroll years. Matter of fact, that was a heyday of recruiting for me on the websites and everything. And then that February signing day, Coach O was just a big part of those huge, historic classes at USC. And then when Lane Kiffin came to SC. He brought Coach O back to USC. And what do you get? You get recruiting classes that are being sanctioned with only like 13, 14 signees being the top recruiting class because, again, a Coach O has that ability to sell development. I'm going to get you to the NFL. This is you. He gets USC. He understands what USC is about. He can sell that message, right? I think we might have that.
Correct.
I think
he goes over to LSU and wins the championship.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. True. Well, and then I think we might have that in Coach Henderson. Coach Henny.
I agree. Now, Riley, I got to make one point. I'm not convinced that Riley's that great of a coach. His years at Oklahoma, he inherited a team. He didn't recruit that team. And two, we're seeing the same thing at SC where he starts off good and it starts going downhill. But one thing I'm hearing is that promises are being made to players and the NIL isn't coming through. And that doesn't make it any easier on these coaches to recruit.
Well, remember this. Lincoln Riley was offensive coordinator at Oklahoma before he became the head coach. And a lot of the success, I think, that turned around Oklahoma, the year before he got there as OC, Oklahoma had 5 losses. You know who the defensive coordinator was? Mike Stoops, Bob Stoops' brother.
I can't recall. Go.
It was Mike Stoops, Bob Stoops' brother, who he inherited as his defensive coordinator, which kind of hamstrung him for those early years. Their defenses were not very good. That had Bob Stoops' handwriting all over it, hiring Mike Stoops. Yeah, and it just seems like Lincoln Riley has had a poor track record of hiring defensive. Well, really, he's only hired 2 defensive coordinators. You know, he had Grinch, and now he's just hired Lynn. And we'll see how Lynn works out. But in reality, if we're talking about inheriting a program, he inherited the defensive coordinator and Mike Stoops. And no one's questioning Riley's offense. I mean, Riley's offense has been a top 5 offense, since he's been a head coach, and that's not been the issue.
Well,
and,
we got.
Well, hang on a second. And a lot of those guys, that came over to Oklahoma during those early Oklahoma years, he was OC. He brought them in as well. So really, a lot of the success we're talking about Oklahoma, because the Oklahoma defense sucked. What was good about Oklahoma was the offense. And Lincoln Riley, before he became the head coach. So when we say, what did he inherit? He didn't inherit really a whole lot of anything. He built that offense. The defense was already sucking wind. And I think that he probably made a mistake. Like everyone, hindsight's 2020, bringing Grinch. Now we know it was a mistake. He hung on to him too long, which is another reason. But like you just said about Jen Cohen, Matt, you bring a guy in who comes over with you from Oklahoma. He's probably going to be fired from Oklahoma anyway. But he comes over from Oklahoma on a plane in the middle of the night, and you fire him in 1 year. What does that look like for defensive coordinators when you're given 1 year to turn around a defense at USC that was pretty bad to begin with the year before? So I mean, there's a lot of mess involved. I think really, if you want to start looking at Lincoln Riley, he's a young coach. This is his hire. This is a hire he's made. I think it's going to be a solid hire. And then we see how they play on the field this year. I think, people tend to forget that he has been a coach for what? How many years has he been a coach? 7 years? 8 years, Matt? Help me out.
Well, I mean, he was offensive coordinator at East Carolina before he came to Oklahoma. He was a grad assistant at Texas
head
Tech.
coach. Like head coach.
Well,
head coach.
Head coach was 2017. So, 7 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, you need to, I think fans just get over throwing, he's not a good coach. When does this all start? He's a very good coach. You don't get to, I don't care if you inherit anything. If you get to the playoffs 4 times when you're the offensive coordinator and you're the reason why you're getting there and you're the head coach, that's pretty significant to me. And I think that he inherited, I think a lot of USC fans forget what USC was like when he showed up here. Don't forget that, where the program was. You can't compare it to like an Urban Meyer who walks into a Tressel situation, or it's not that same situation where you just keep the ball rolling. He didn't inherit a program like that. AJ, what's your point?
Two things. He's not doing a good job of recruiting out of California, and the O-line isn't looking real good right now.
The O-line's not looking good right now? You mean last year or this year?
I mean what we're bringing in.
What we're bringing in. Well, agreed. I'm not going to argue that. I
I mean,
agree.
for an offensive genius, you got to have an O-line.
I think we're talking about the same thing. In order to pull in top quality college players, you need to have an NIL program. I think you got to realize that as well, AJ. Do you think that's Lincoln Riley is the problem there? Or do you think it's because there are programs, I don't know, like Uncle Phil, Oregon, that are paying top dollar for offensive tackles?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's true.
Okay, so is it Lincoln Riley? Is it USC? Is it Jen Cohn? Is it the entire athletic department? There are problems. I'm not sitting up here saying there's nothing wrong at USC right now. Clearly there is when other programs are doing so well. And USC is having difficulty.
One problem is when you can't keep the players in state. With the staff like that, we're losing too many in-state great players that are going elsewhere.
And the other point, well, remember this, okay? Look at the big picture. When did this defensive staff come in? AJ?
No, it just came.
They just came.
It just came. We just picked up Henderson this year.
And are they from California? Do they have roots in California with Mater Dei and the players at Mater Dei and the coaches at Mater Dei and St. John Bosco and Centennial? Do they know this area?
Well, again, we heard rumblings that Lincoln was he wasn't reaching out to a lot of those programs either prior to this.
Well, we can hear rumblings. My point to you is two things. These players in Southern California grew up being Duck fans, seeing Alabama win championships, seeing Georgia win championships, seeing Ohio State a field goal away from a championship, and they've seen USC lose 5 games here or there, and then deal with what we had to do with for 6 years under Helton. To blame the staff for who just came in the door for the recruiting, I think may not be prudent. Matt, please chime in. Tell me I'm crazy. What am I missing?
You're not crazy. And I think, the really salient point the caller makes, though, is that, let's go back to Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson. Like the fallout from those decommitments is really what has people upset. If USC had retained Terry and Gibson, the fan base would not be upset the way it is. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but what the caller said is that promises were made and apparently they weren't kept, that Terry and Gibson soured on USC. Most like we don't know this for a fact, but like the chatter behind the scenes points to, they were expecting a certain amount of something and they didn't get it. And Jeff Rodriguez has said, why is Cohen being blamed? And I said earlier on the program that the reason why USC is struggling with NIL is mostly because of the reputational damage done by Alex Grinch, and that's the extension of Lincoln Riley's decision to retain him. So that decision, more than anything Cohen has or hasn't done, is why USC's in this position. That said, if we're going to try and assign some level of responsibility for everything, does Jen Cohen run the NIL operation? No. Okay. But she is, if you're the athletic director, you are the chief fundraiser. You are the fundraiser in chief. President is commander in chief. AD is fundraiser in chief for the athletic program. And so there needed to be conversations of, okay, what's being promised to Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson in the NIL space? Okay, are we delivering that? Are conversations being had with the people who are running the collective? All right, and with Lincoln Riley being kept in the loop, Lincoln Riley can't run the NIL either, as well as Jen Cohen, but they both need to be in a communications loop with the people who run the collectives, and there all needs to be alignment and agreement and mutual awareness. Are we delivering what's being promised? And if someone dropped the ball, now we can blame the NIL collective most directly, but if we don't know this for sure, but if there were worries about the NIL collective, the AD needs to be on top of that situation. And the AD, if things are being run properly, the AD is going to make sure that there's a donor who can write a check to cover any short-term gap or fix any short-term problem to make sure that the promises that were made are in fact kept and that the deliverables are delivered. So at some point, someone dropped the ball. And while all the blame doesn't rest with Jen Cohen, there certainly needs to be structural completeness and there needs to be fullness of alignment. And we don't have that fullness of alignment. And Jen Cohen, as fundraiser in chief, has to be able to knit those things together. Now, I'm not gonna roast her for this state of affairs, but I am going to say, like, she needs to be able to put the pieces together. That's really what I'm going to say on this.
And I want to say this too, and I know I speak for you, Matt. We are not saying that we know that none of us are privy to what's actually happening as far as NIL is concerned. We can all follow the breadcrumbs. We can all, listen to articles, an article that came out in the newspaper. There's a lot of stuff you can do, but until you have actual hands-on proof, I will say it's kind of clear that something's getting our butts kicked. But the thing is, just NIL is also probably a bit incomplete. But there is, without a doubt, I don't think anyone here is saying that NIL at USC is okay. We know that. It's just let's stop just short of saying we know that there's promises being made that aren't being made. Because I don't want to. I certainly, personally, I don't want to say that I don't want that. That's just a rumor. I don't want to keep throwing that rumor out there. This is what people are saying. I am not saying I have any proof that that's actually happening at USC, but I will say there's clearly something wrong with the NIL.
And let me just step in here. What Jeff Rodriguez says below here, entirely on point. And for people who want Jen Cohen fired, we need to stop. And beyond the point I made earlier that you can't fire an AD one year in unless there's something really unethical or inappropriate in terms of
it's not even being discussed.
Conduct.
So let's just get off that topic.
No, but I'm saying beyond that point, which has already been litigated, it's already been mentioned. You also have to acknowledge Jen Cohen, the investments in facilities, the investments in defensive coaches. Like, if you want her fired, you can't just ignore what Jeff is saying below here. But this is also instructive in that, okay, Cohen's handled the facilities, she's handled the defensive coaching staff and given Lincoln Riley the upgrade. So it does mean that her job right now, like what she needs to do, what she needs to fix, it's all about the NIL. That is what she needs to be paying attention to now, so that when we get into the next off season in 2025, this stuff is fixed. This stuff is ready to go. All right. So look, we can't repair the NIL ship right now in time for us to, overtake Lanning and overtake Ohio State in this cycle. But when we get into the offseason, and of course, USC needs to have at least 9 wins to take into the offseason and to have some positive forward momentum. Assuming that USC does have an improved performance on the field this season, it's from December through the summer of 2025. That's when we need to see repairs and improvements in the NIL architecture, and that's when we'll be able to tell if Jen Cohen is really making the grade.